What about now? Can you hear me?
I hear you, and I don't hear any crackle or sizzle
Okay.
or anything.
Yeah, I think that other headset is broken.
I wasn't going to say anything because I was like, I just got these wireless earbuds. I just got them. And I was like, I probably just bought some shitty earbuds.
No, we had a problem with them last week, but then I forgot to buy new ones. So I was like, I must have another pair somewhere.
I always have weird kind of problems around here. I got a neighbor, like right next door neighbor, who's well, let's just say he has like some concerns about people watching him. So yeah, but yeah.
That's funny.
Oh, apparently we're live.
We are live. Welcome to the Noah and Jay Hour. We killed Dan. We've chopped him up. We've disposed of his parts, but that's a story for another day. What else? Yeah, I think we're waiting on Dan to restart his computer, and then we'll get the show on the road. So anyone who's watching, you're stuck with us.
Hello, Susan.
So you're telling a story today, Jay, is that correct?
That is my impression. Yep.
All right. I may be retelling your story, is my impression. So
Okay.
I'm going to take careful notes. And I hang on to every word you say. Does your story have a title?
Not at present.
Not
No.
at present. Okay.
I guess we could call it for the time being the eviction agent.
The eviction agent.
Yeah. As far as a working title.
All right. Oh, Susan's backstage, and Dan's not here, so I can't bring her to the front of the stage. So where did Dan find you?
He and I both participated in the same like 99-second story slam.
Okay.
And then, social media being the wonder that it is, where he was able to contact me and, we started talking a little bit. And, he does this story luck and, one thing led to another. And now here I am.
Now we are blessed. I found Dan, or he found me at a Domino's Pizzas in Westerville, Ohio. Like 15 years ago at this point, maybe even longer ago.
Now there's definitely a story there.
My favorite story of Dan from when I knew him then is we were both delivering pizzas, and one day we're like at opposite sides of an intersection.
I don't want to know the rest of the story.
And I see this maniac taking a left turn or whatever. Just carrying to the intersection, and it's Dan's car. I don't know if it's Dan because he's got a freaking book up in front of his face. So he was always. Am I back?
I can hear you.
I'm on my hotspot, and I got a call, and then my internet seemed to stop working for the call.
Okay, and we're on Facebook. Thank you, everybody. Sorry for that delay. We'll tell you what happened. And basically it said that I had an instance of Zoom open, and so I couldn't be in this. And it took me 3 restarts of the computer before whatever was in the cache would uncache. And we, I think, are gonna have Corey with us. I saw him a while ago, and he said he was going to be here, but maybe something came up. And thank you for coming to the Workshop show. Let me open up Twitch so I can see it. We are Storyluck. We are a 501c3, and we are here today with Jay Rohr, Susan Maller, who is our resident newbie. Susan, can you lower your camera just a bit? Can you back away from where you're sitting just a bit? The bottom of your face is getting cut off. Or perhaps, yes, that'll work. Perfect. And then Noah is our raconteur, and he's been producing storytelling shows with me for forever, since we started Storyluck. And we are going to start the show with a little question. Today's question is, think of 2 sentences to answer this question. What's your favorite story about music? Personal, cultural, or otherwise?
My favorite story is, I don't know where I heard this, and I'm sure it's not true, but allegedly Bob Dylan was hanging out with Mick Jagger and told Mick Jagger, I could have written Satisfaction, but there's no way you could have written Mr. Tambourine Man. Think about it. So I enjoy that.
Yeah, that's good. I have heard that somewhere as well.
Yeah, probably from me, Dan.
I think Mick Jagger tells that story.
Well, if Mick Jagger tells it,
it's got to be true.
It's got to be true, right? He looks so bad in that story.
He might not know he looks bad in the story.
Susan, do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I didn't understand until right now what you said in that email, but now I got it. So my favorite one is Eric Clapton. And
what is that guy's name?
Eric Clapton. No.
Great. Perfect.
Did I get it wrong again? I get his name wrong every time.
Every time, yes. Yeah. What could that guy's name be?
She's not talking about Eric Clapton. She's talking about his cousin.
About his cousin, the Clamp.
Oh, so Eric Clapton and Peter from The Who. What's his name?
Townsend.
Yeah. So they went to see. So Peter Townsend said, Eric Clapton, we have to go to see this guy because he's going to like wash us away. And so they went to a Jimi Hendrix concert, and they were like scared to death of him being on the scene.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
What about you, Dan?
So the reason this came up for me is a friend of mine. I was talking about how she had gotten tendonitis in her hand, and for a while she couldn't play the cello. And there was a very famous cellist who got MS, and she couldn't play anymore, but she continued to teach. And she would have students come, and my friend worked with her and was a student with her for a little bit, and she would have them listen to recordings of her playing in her youth when she was a genius. And my friend walked away from it being like, I would never do that. If this tendonitis thing had stayed, I would have just never played ever again. I would never have looked at a cello. Nope. Fuck cello. If I can't have it, I can never have it in my life. And that put a tickle in my belly. Jay, do you have an answer for favorite musical moment?
Well, going along the lines, jumping off of what you just said, I'm reminded of Tony Iommi, the guitar player for Black Sabbath. Right before he went on tour for the first time, I can't remember exactly if this was with Sabbath, but he was about to go on he was about to go on tour with a band that he was in. He was working as a machinist at the time, and he went home for lunch, and he was like, Mom, screw that job. I'm just going to quit and go on tour tomorrow. And she was like, no, Tony, you got to finish out your day. So he went back to work and cut off the end of his finger working on a piece of equipment that he'd never used before. And as a guitarist, you need your fingers. So what happened was that he ended up getting Tony Iommi basically has an artificial finger, like just the end, because it's just the tip. But his self-consciousness, when it came to, he was concerned because his playing got a little out of sorts. So he started experimenting with increasing the gain and using more distortion on his guitar. And that's why Black Sabbath has the sound that it does, because he created that crackle in order to hide the fact that his guitar playing was not as good as it used to be.
This one I did not know. That's a good one. All right. So thank you for everyone and getting to know each other. We are going to move straight into stories with a slight digression, which is there's something that I always forget, and can Noah or Susan help me out?
Yeah, I can help you out.
Thank you very much, Noah.
You always forget that we are all friends here. And you just tear into everyone like you're trying to end their life. No, I'm kidding. That's not what happens. We are all friends. We are always critiquing the work, never the person. So if you're watching for the first time and you're getting worried when we're doing our little critique and you're like, oh no, this is too harsh, the storyteller is going to start crying. Hopefully not, because we all know it's to make the story better. It's not to criticize anyone, or and that's how we grow as artists, right? We get feedback and we incorporate it and we see what works and what doesn't.
Awesome. Yeah, and Jay is a confident, competent human being, and if he ever hears anything that we don't like, he knows to just toss it out. We're never going to know his story better than anybody else's. Hey, Corey.
Hi, Corey.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Hi, Corey.
I'm going to medium throw you under the bus, Corey. And real quick, get to know you question. What is your favorite musical moment?
I think it would be seeing Prince live, and seeing him do an acoustic version of Little Red Corvette at Summerfest in Milwaukee 8 or 9 years ago.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's how close is that to near the last time anybody could see him?
Oh, well, considering he's been dead for 5, I think that's probably what?
It's close.
Yeah, it's really.
That's like probably like his last tour or something, because it wasn't like he was out touring.
Well, remember he had kind of like that several-year residency in Las Vegas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was one of the last couple of tours that he did.
Yeah, that's great. All right. So, are you ready to share a story with us, Jay?
Yeah, I guess so.
Cool. I'm gonna go
Give it a
ahead
shot.
and pin you and just let her rip whenever you're ready.
Okay. So this takes place roughly a little bit after 2008, probably like maybe 2009. Could have been close to 2010. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head. But essentially what was happening was this is right around time the housing bubble had burst and the housing market was in steep decline. And there were a lot of evictions going on. A friend of mine, he worked in real estate. And he called me up one day and he said, hey, dude, I heard that you're looking for a job because I was out of work at the time. And he said, look, I got this new assignment from my company. I got to go out and I got to deliver eviction and receivership notices. And I'm a little hesitant about going out there by myself. Would you be willing to come with me? I'll pay you for your time. And I was like, yeah, sure. Because first off, I'm looking for a job. And then on top of that, it's my buddy. And I was like, how hard is this going to be? You know, we just got to go to people's houses, knock on the door, give them a piece of paper and get the hell out of there. So I wasn't too concerned about it. We get together and we drive out. We go out to about the south side, Sauk Village out here in Chicago is what it's called. And we're out. This is our first house. It's the first person we got to deal with in this situation. And we go up to the property. We knock on the door, and a gentleman answers it. He's got no shirt on, and his chest, on his bare chest, he's got the zipper scar, which is a clear indication of having recently had open heart surgery. On top of that, he has a colostomy bag that he's carrying, and he looks exhausted. And he just says to us, "Hey, what's going on?" And we proceed to explain to him that his property is now in receivership. And if you're not familiar with what that is, essentially what it is that your landlord has gone into a forfeiture, and they're going through the whole legal process of, like fighting foreclosure and so forth. So they can't collect rent for the time being. And essentially what happens is it goes to a third party and so on and so forth. But it's a losing battle with the bank is essentially what it is. Most of the time, you're probably just forestalling what's going on. But as we're explaining to this guy what's happening, he picks up on it because he's not stupid. He says to us, he's like, so what's going to happen with this property if the bank gets it? We're like, they're probably going to kick you out because that's the other notice that we have to give you. So basically, one of two things is going to happen. Either you can stay here for the next 2 months or you can get out of here right now. Like, that's the situation. And he just looks at it, he just goes, and he just starts talking. And he tells us about the fact that a couple of months ago, he had a massive heart attack. And they brought him in, they cracked him open, and they fixed what was wrong with him, and they saved his life. And then when he got out of the hospital, he was going to the drugstore in order to get some prescription, to prevent infection, so on and so forth, blood pressure medication, that kind of thing. And while he was at the pharmacy, a guy busted in and just tried to rob the place and ended up shooting him, which is why now he's got this colostomy bag and he's shitting it. God. And he's like, and now you guys are here telling me that I'm getting evicted in like a month or two. We were like, sorry, here's your paperwork. And then we got in the car and we're sitting there and I just looked at my friend. I was like, I don't know if this is going to be as easy as I thought it was. And he's like, it can't get worse, right? But it steady on got pretty worse. We went out, we got to see property that was neglected in a way that is just insulting to people, to tenants and that kind of thing. Like I went to a house, they had no heat. The only thing that was keeping the house warm was the oven. They turned on the oven, they opened it up, and they just let it go full blast. I saw a house where the basement looked like something out of a horror movie. I mean, it was just covered in a dripping black goop. I don't even know how to describe it. And we would see all these properties and became very aware of what was going on with a lot of the landlords in the situation. A lot of the people we dealt with were rental properties. And we became like increasingly aware, like this one guy, we had to evict people from 20 houses, families from 20 properties. got evicted because this one guy, essentially, he used all of his properties to get himself a massive loan from the bank. So he basically got himself like $250,000 in like mortgages and shit like that, and then used that to buy a giant mountain of cocaine. And then when it didn't kill him, he found himself in court, like in foreclosure and trying to fight it. And he was a lot of fun because when we were telling people about the receivership, the money goes here, not here. He had called everyone in advance to tell them that there were a couple of con men coming around the neighborhoods, telling people to send their rent money over here as opposed to him. So we would answer the door and people were like, no, you're a bunch of scam artists and so on and so forth, and turned into a couple of tense situations. But overall, what was the most interesting for me was just getting this shifted perspective on what was going on. Because if you were watching the news at that time, even when it came to people, stations like MSNBC, there were still people with a large attitude that anybody getting foreclosed at that time, anybody losing their home when after the bubble popped, probably deserved it. That was the consensus across the country, was this whole idea that if you owned property that you couldn't afford, you had done something wrong. The notion that these predatory lending practices and that there were, scummy landlords and so forth hadn't really taken hold yet. So every night I would go home and I'd be watching the news and there'd be at least one talking head on there explaining how if people are getting evicted, don't feel bad for them. They bought a house that they couldn't afford. And this is what happens to you because people want to live and so on and so forth. And the whole time it was just like, no, dude, that's not what's happening. And it was fascinating because I'd never been so directly involved in a cultural event, for lack of a better way to put it, a cultural event where you could see the distortion of reality happening on the news every day. So that's what I got for now. So thank you very much.
It's a good story.
Yeah, that's a great story. Let me unpin you here. That clocked in at 6 minutes and 30 seconds.
Mm.
I'm going to ask, are there any specific things that you're thinking about trying to get this place to, or doing it for a specific show or anything of that nature?
Well, I did a variation on this one time for a friend of mine's curated show back before, obviously before all of this. And I think one of the things is like I just trying to convey like it's a tricky story for me because of the fact that like I feel like the people we encountered, it's sort of like their story, and like just talking about the fact that like I'm having a weird time with like I felt really awkward telling this family to get out of their own house, I mean, it feels like I'm not really the victim in this story in any way, shape, or form. I felt incredibly awkward the entire time I was doing this job, but like I needed it because I had no other income at the time. So it was that situation where you're like, I don't want to do this, but if I don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. Like, and the only reason he called me is because he knew me, and like we have background. Like, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'1", I'm 240 pounds. I fill up a doorway. I'm not a particularly violent person, but I did stop a bar fight once just by getting up out of a bar stool. Like, because that's a whole other thing. They thought that I was pissed off about what was going on over there, and then they were like, no, you pissed off the bear in the corner. And it was just, I didn't have any idea. I had no idea what was going on. I just got up to go outside to smoke. And they thought I was just pissed off at them. And they were like, no, the giant fucking angry dude just got up. Oh, fuck. So,
there's a 99. Okay. So I think you brought up a lot of good things, and you sort of hinted at and talked about a little bit. A couple of people just jumped on, just so everybody who's watching knows. Well, what's happening here is Jay's told a story. It's about basically going around and giving people their eviction notice papers and his experience of that. And it goes into the greater cultural experience of that and how that was portrayed on television and the internet and such. And we're talking about it and different things that we can do with it. So our usual normal go-to question, and you did touch on this a little bit, is how did it feel to you telling it this time?
It still feels like, I don't know, there's still something like a little unnatural about it on occasion, but the one thing like that sort of pops in my head is that like I feel like it loses track because there are certain elements that need to be explained, and it sort of gets away, like explaining what a receivership is sort of like a dull detail, regardless of how it matters to the story. It almost feels like it's something that could be dropped because I think everybody knows what an eviction is. I don't think that a lot of people are familiar with the concept, and even what I present is a very reduced version of simplification of what it means.
But so I think you're right that you've got a number of tricky things to tackle in this story. One, it's a great story, right? You told it very well, and I found your explanations. I didn't know what a receivership was, and I feel like I do now. So I thought you did a really good job of, at least in the sense of it was clear to me, and in a short period of time. But I think you hit the nail on the head there, that's a complicated thing to have to do when there's working pieces of puzzle where you have to do a sort of a technical explanation. That's just hard. And then also you've got this thing that I've been talking about fortuitously or serendipitously all day today, that it's tough to tell stories that are about other people. And Corey, when I was talking about it with him earlier, had a good point where he was like, there might be a place for it, right? What's there's a place where the audience's expectation is, I'm going to tell something about something else. And so that's one solution to that problem. But I think we'll discuss that one. We can discuss some more. But I think that's a really good, both those things that you thought of while you were telling it seem really astute to me. So I think your head is in the right place. I'm going to pass it off while I run and grab a pen. What are some thoughts? What are some things that you liked about the story, Susan?
That's a story that's pretty close to my heart, basically, because I kind of felt like you did, even though I didn't go around having to evict people, that the media had portrayed it incredibly wrong. And so listening to somebody who was in it felt really good to me to, just kind of validate, like that's what happened. That's truly what happened. So I liked the story a lot. I liked hearing it from your point of view. So the only thing, I guess, like you said that it's hard, between like what's your emotion, what's their emotion. But lots of times with stories, if you can just drag emotion into it a little more, so that you really like feel the heartache of the families. I know that's hard for you because you were giving them the heartache. So it's hard to want to like even, put that in the story. But I think it helps the story if you can, add as much emotion as you can, because it was hard. Those people, were stuck between a rock and a hard place, and it wasn't their doing at all. And I'm sure, some of them probably cried, or, some of them got angry, like, so maybe a little more emotion about, what did they do? How did they feel? And was there any, they told you to go evict them, but did anybody tell you to be like, hey, here's some alternatives for you? Or was that just like, oh, no, that's not part of your job?
That specifically, as you were talking about that, that did spring to my mind. We were specifically told not to inform people as to their particular legal options, other than you can turn over your eviction notice and there's some stuff on there that you can go to.
Because bullshit liability.
Yeah. So, but also, like, we would be driving around, we're like, I get this weird feeling like they don't want people to know what their rights are, because when we started getting familiar with the process a little bit more, it was like one of the things that started. It just
they will make
we
more
were like,
money easier if these people are dumb.
Oh yeah, especially when it comes to rental properties. The bank is if you're a renter and the bank is going to seize the property from a landlord, you're going to get evicted. It doesn't matter 90% of the time. 9 times out of 10, it's not going to matter whether or not you paid all your rent on time. Like, you're a good tenant. You were never the problem, because to the bank, there's no value in you as a renter. Your house is the value. That's what they want. They don't want to have to deal with it, because here's the thing. Since you're a renter, like I said, the houses that we were seeing, some of these places were just, for lack of a better term, they were shitholes, because the landlords didn't care about them, so they let them fall to pieces. And the consequence of that, when the bank takes ownership, they become the landlord, which means they're liable for all the damages and all the problems that are on the property. So if your house is not being heated because your boiler doesn't work, the bank has to pay for the replacement. They don't want to deal with that. So they just evict your ass and then sell the property as is.
Yeah. Yeah. But really, and again, this goes to a conversation that Corey and I were having earlier, that a lot of times these companies just aren't thinking and they're not agile enough, right? These banks, if they've got renters who are good, they're going to make more money collecting rent. And they're perfectly capable of becoming landlords who collect rent. Like, you know what I mean? They could do that, but that's not the system, right? And doing a change is too hard. So it's sort of what was the term you used, Corey? I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit with the we make
dollars, we don't make sense.
right. So there's times where corporations just make so much money, they just don't care if they lose it for a little bit. I'm gonna throw it to Noah and then back to Corey to say things that you liked about the story.
Yeah, thanks for telling the story. It was super interesting. I mean, that's one of the milestones in my life. Like, 9/11 was a big inflection point, and then the housing crash, like, that changed a lot in our world. So it's like cool to hear those stories from how that changed other people's life and how that went on. And also, like, your ending part, I thought that was really interesting, about the distortion on the media. And I definitely felt that, where I was having a lot of conversations about, these irresponsible borrowers and how they were, if not foolish, then they were outright scamming everyone. So I always appreciate when, like, the other side of that story is told. So notes, yeah, I just basically sort of similar things to what Susan said, like, and kind of what you touched on, like, there's the story of you, and you actually got to it. You kind of, after Dan was asked you how you felt, like, this was a hard job for you, right? You didn't necessarily feel super comfortable or super happy, like, telling people they were getting kicked out of their houses. And I feel like that's definitely something you want to put in there, right? So that we understand, like, you have a guy who's there's like, this, I don't know, farcical nature to kicking out this person who's, just completely down on his luck. But, seeing the other side of that, where that's like really tearing you up, and, explicitly talking about how that's making you feel, I think would add a lot to the story. And yeah, although I like the ending, I wasn't sure like how you sort of weave that into it, because it feels a little bit like, I don't know how that would fit in with, the story of how this was a hard thing for you to do and a hard thing for the other people. And maybe someone else has some ideas about that. It didn't feel like it didn't belong. It just didn't feel like it connected seamlessly.
When you're talking about the ending, do you mean where he sort of zoomed out to the parts where I got home and I'm looking at the media? Yeah. One idea is that might be a place you're zooming out, but we could also zoom into you. If you give us a little setting in that, and just tell us, like, because you got a great line in there about that, you remember you did 20 of these. And you can sort of give that to us and put us in a place where that happens and where you're ruminating on it. Put us in that room with you as you're clicking through and giving us your emotion through that. That's one thought. And then Corey.
Hey, Jay.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. So let's talk about things that I really liked. First of all, you have such a grounded style that you're very believable and you're very credible. So that works, right? Another part that I liked was the fact that you are really getting behind the music in your moment when you're going to, after this first notice, you delivered this first notice and you are grounding it in the senses. You recognize that he's got the zipper scar. You recognize that he's got the ostomy bag over here, and you've suddenly moved this from the abstract to the concrete, that there are real people on the other sides of these doors. And that grounded it for me in terms of, this is not the easy, quick job that you thought it was. And you say that exact same line. There's another moment in here where you are, where you're dealing with the actual conditions of the place as opposed to the people. That also grounds, that furthers your track to say that this isn't just someone who's overambitious with a balloon payment. This is a place that's dripping with black goo, and on top of that, there's another place where the only heat is from the oven that's being cranked up full blast. You've grounded it very much into a people moment, and then you've given us physical descriptions of the living conditions, and that makes a difference in terms of where the story is going to go.
Yeah. Let me see. Do you feel like you have a theme statement? Is that something you're like trying to find right now, or?
Yeah, I guess as I'm trying to figure out like where to take this story, because this is definitely in its rough draft phase. Even when I did it for the curated show, the thing that kind of embarrassed me when I did it then was it was like in the middle of it, I realized I was like, this is not going towards something specific. And I like realized like I had all these, basically I had a lot of these scenes that were, at least to me, compelling, and to some of the audience they were as well. But then when I got to the end was just sort of like, and shit happens. Like that was it. Like I literally like stood on stage and was just like, so that's all I got. Life is terrible. Who wants to go drinking? Like that was my closing line. So basically, so it was just like, I feel like there's a missing theme, because it's one of these stories where you're just like, what's the best way to put this? You feel like it has to be told, but it does have to be contextualized in some way in order to make it have an impact, because otherwise it really is just a sort of march through the awfulness of what was going on at that time.
Yeah, and a lot of times if you are in that march, it becomes really hard for the audience to hear it. If they don't know what the takeaway is, then it's like, oh, that sucked, and then I'll slot it and it goes away. But if we know what the takeaway is, then there's that one thing, and we don't have to sort of protect ourselves from the horribleness. Yeah. What if has anybody said right now felt like it's led you to something to be like, maybe this is the takeaway?
I do have one notion, like, and it's an element that I can add to the story, and I would, of course, in a retelling, I would love to get the feedback on that, because there's I don't know if I should just deliver it right now, if I should just give it to you right now, what I'm thinking. Okay, so like I said, we were specifically told not to explain to anybody their rights or their options when they were being evicted. And then we became more familiar with the process and what was going on. And as we continued doing the job, we started telling people, like, here's what you should do. You're already being evicted. Like, we basically started giving people like a very, very loose rundown on what they could do. Because, like, we're not, my friend and I, we're not lawyers, but we have this general conception of, like, what can be done. And we would basically tell people things they could do in order, like, now that you're in this process, there's certain things. Like, for instance, we told this one family, we were like, contest it. Just contest the eviction. Because then you have to go to court and you have to present everything. We were like, but here's the point. You're not really contesting it, because you're going to lose. What happens, though, is that your 30-day notice now turns into about 90 days, roughly thereabouts, because you get extra time on top of it. Here's the trick. Contest it on the 29th day of your eviction notice. Like 29 days from now, contest it. You'll get an extra 90 days on top of it. During this whole time period, do not pay anyone any rent. Keep all that money for yourself, and then use that as your first payment to move into a different apartment, a different flat, whatever, a different, 2-story duplex, whatever. Keep the money for yourself. Keep living here, and then just basically just scam the bank out of, all the rent payment and everything, and then just leave. Like, before your court date, just jump ship and go. And they're not going to care. Nobody's going to pursue you. You haven't technically done anything wrong. So just go for it. And we sort of started doing this with more and more people as time was going by. And there was like this, I guess, this quasi, like, yeah, we're sticking it to the man feeling. But at the same time, it was like the end of every day was just like, well, shit, we still evicted those people. Like, we gave them an extra month, but, like, we were making ourselves feel better. But I mean, I guess the thing is, like, I don't want to make myself sound like, I'm a hero at the end of the day because I got people an extra month to freeze in a shitty house in Chicago, which, if you're not from Chicago, you don't want to be here in the winter without any heat. You don't want to be here in the winter with heat.
Noah knows that story. I tried to convince him to move here, and he was here for the summer, and then as soon as winter came, he was like, No. No.
And I'm not from Florida. I'm just from Ohio.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I think that's great. And let's explore that a little bit. So I think, and I'm open to ideas from anybody on this, but I think that really puts you in the center of this. And also, it's a hard thing to do, like you said, because it's sort of, you don't want to be that hero. But I think that'll make it a super interesting story to talk about that deep conflict. And there's a change arc for you. I know nothing about evictions or eviction processes. I find out about them. I feel horrible. I don't know what to do. People are telling me to do stuff that I think is even more morally wrong. And thank God I've got this friend who I can turn to and be like, can we do this? You know, I don't know which of you brought it up or whether it's a mutual thing, and tell me whether this rings true to you or not. But in these situations, I think that's a really big thing, to have someone with you to be like co-conspirator. Yeah, we are going to give people advice. Like, doing that by yourself is so tough. So having somebody with you, I think, is a powerful thing. And you come up with a plan, and you get home, and you get to reflect on it. And you get to reflect on it while the TV is sitting there totally misrepresenting what's going on. And we can see that conflict of, I tried to do the right thing, but you can only do so much. There's certainly other ways to go about it. Corey's got his hand up. I'm going to throw to him.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I think we can take one step further back, because everyone's home, no matter how humble, is their home. And homes that we might condemn, to someone who's living there, that's still their home, and they can be proud of it. And I think when we start this story, we're looking at these situations like, you haven't taken care of your home, so this is what you get. And then as you keep progressing through these subsequent evictions, you keep finding that, what I'm told on the media isn't what is. And there are legitimate people paying their rent in these horrible conditions, and this is their home. And at some point or another, that conflict is in here. It's an internal conflict that suggests, hey, we can do something a little bit different here, because even though we're only giving them an extra 30 days, who am I to judge how this person's living, right? Because I see the change by the time by the end of this story, right? That you're like, wait a second, this isn't what's represented on the media. These people aren't bad folks. It's somebody else who's pulling the strings that's making this happen.
High noon.
I mean, does that framework work, or is that just me being wackadoodle?
No, you're making a lot of sense, and you're giving me some great ideas on how I can sort of sculpt this in a way. Like right now, I got this big pile of material, and I think what we're doing here, we're doing a great job of like whittling it down to what's most important, but also streamlining it in a way so that it looks like something. Like, we're starting here and we're going to move across, so it flows like a narrative, and not just like some anthology of like shitty
it's not
eviction
just
stories.
plot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to ask that. I like that idea. I want to ask, though, explicitly, did you feel at any point like that? Was it in your head at all, like, yeah, people who get evicted, they kind of made a bad gamble?
Like while I was doing the job or before I started the job?
Like what? Like say years before.
Beforehand, yeah, there were certain instances because I did know people that had like I personally knew people that lost property, and I was like, well, that guy's in a $2 million mansion, and I know for a fact that he makes like $65,000 a year, which is not bad. I would like to be making $65,000 a year, like right now, or at any time in my life. But like he was living in his $2 million mansion, he like could not afford it. He was a person living on like credit cards and all that kind of shit. He was more concerned about his image and everything. So, like, I did know people, but as the case is, anecdotal evidence is not the best way to go about these things. So, I had this sense that there was this feeling like, yeah, maybe most of those people did, maybe they screwed themselves. Maybe it was their own fault. I didn't really think about it too much. I didn't think.
There's no need to really spend time on it when you're not really confronted with it. So then, I really like Corey's suggestion of opening up with, something to the effect of, hey, I didn't think about this. But in my not thinking about it, this is what I thought. Or starting us off with, there's a media blitz. It's 2000, blah, blah, blah. There's a media blitz all around me. And they're all saying about these dumb guys who are getting evicted because they lived out their means. I mean, if you give us that creates a cool arc from you get there to, oh shit, now I'm confronted with it. Also his point about getting a moment, and maybe in that end, I don't know where it goes, but in that reflection of, what's it mean to have a home? What's it mean to get kicked out of your home? The home is a sacred spot, and whether that's for now or sometimes there, I think you can take some time and look at that and create some poetic language about it.
Mm-hmm.
I got a quick thing I'm curious about. So when you're going around doing this, are you getting are people blaming you, or are they sort of cognizant that you're just sort of a piece of the machinery, right? This is not you. Or are you getting a lot of abuse, or does it vary?
It largely varied person to person. Person to person, family to family. Even within a family, you'd have one person in there and it'd be like, don't yell at him. He's just whatever. But there were instances where it was like, some people understand it's just you're just doing your job, and some people they're venting at you. I mean, they're yelling at you because they're pissed, and at least that's the way I would try to think about it. Like, I know this guy's yelling at me, but he's not really mad at me. I mean, deep down, he's got to know, like, I am not the bank, because if I was the bank, I wouldn't dress like this. Like,
I'd be out on the street. I'd be in an office.
Yeah, that was another thing. Like, I remember I asked him, we're going to do this. Should I dress a certain way specifically? He's like, no, just dress like the way you usually do, the scary way. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. He was like, yeah, just like don't shave, like wear something mean, like wear like your scummy chore clothes and shit. Like look like you came from the dive bar to come fight somebody. Like, I don't know if we're sending the right message from the get-go that because he came in like a collared shirt and khaki pants and looked really nice, and then next to him is just this shaved Sasquatch, that is just like, we're here to throw you out of your house. So we were sort of like presenting a dynamic right from the get-go that, I think that may have influenced some people's opinion of us from time to time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these are great details, and I think probably there's going to have to be a version where this is a 15-minute story so that you can get them all in to figure out which ones need to be in there and are the big ones, because spending a couple minutes in that scene where we really get to see you two walking up and you're intimidating just by presence a dude with a colostomy bag, you know what I mean? Like, or whatever, the other person on the end, a little girl answers the door or whatever it is. And it's just like, that's a powerful scene, and you're going to you got 20 of these to choose from. And I think you're probably going to have to look at them at some point to decide which is which and where.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, some of them have more seriousness than others. There was, and I think, sticking. I don't know if it's wise to at all. Like, I'm going to ask the panel. Like, would it be wise to perhaps float to one of the instances that were, shall we say, a little more comical to lighten the mood at one point? Like, we did interrupt what I can only describe as a teenage sex party, which was kind of funny. It was like we banged on the door and a kid in his underwear opened up, and I look inside and there's just like a bunch of like 40s. The smell of weed is in the air. Kids are clearly like they ditch school. It's a school day. It's a ditch party orgy at this kid's house, and we were just like, "You're evicted." Like, so enjoy banging people on the couch, because that couch is going on the curb. So,
yeah. Yeah, Corey's nodding his head. This is a question for me that I did have going through it, and I don't have a strong answer. I felt like the tone wobbled a little bit as to whether you were going to make it funny or not. Like, it's ripe to be a comedy bit all the way through. There is a version of this which is just hilarious. Like, there just is. But with the theme that we have here and the arc, I think there's room there. I could imagine there being room for comedy relief, but I think it's a careful, tricky thing to get in there and how you do it. Which is kind of riding the fence on that answer for me.
Dan,
are you raising your head? Yeah.
I think you have to have some laughter in there to push back the heaviness of this, because this can be really, really dark, really, really heavy, because you're doing work that not everybody wants to do, right? When you move and uproot somebody from their home, that's deep shit, right? So when you have a moment with the dude with the zipper scar and the colostomy bag, I mean, you're literally scaring the shit out of the guy. So from there, you've got places to go. You're going to have the opportunity to tell some serious stories. You've got the opportunity to tell some funny stories. There's this whole thing, and again, 20 different episodes of this. You've got material with which to play. Was there ever a story here where you felt physically in danger, even at your size?
Very, very well, very briefly. There was one instance. There was one where I was like, "We need to handle this very carefully." Maybe two. But there was one instance where things were getting a little tense. It was specifically it was the house with the oven that was using the oven to keep itself heated. These people were, first off, they were very justifiably upset, period. Like, just angry about their situation to begin with. And now here comes two guys that they've never heard from before who are telling them, like, you're screwed no matter what, get the hell out. And then it was the first time I noticed something that I'd never picked up on before. But looking back in life, I should have realized this. You can tell how somebody handles bad news, but you can tell by people's socioeconomic status how they're going to handle bad news, or something to that effect. I'm trying to think how to phrase this the right way. Essentially, what it comes down to is that, like, we would like whenever we got somebody that happened to be, like, shall we say, like, middle class, and they were like, oh, well, we just couldn't afford our mortgage, I guess we're going to have to move someplace cheaper. They stand in front of you, just like as a row, and they just take bad news as it gets delivered. In this instance, specifically, and a couple other times, someone in the family starts to drift around, and all of a sudden, like, there's a cousin behind you that you didn't even know was in the house. Like, as you deliver bad news, people who are lower down society's ladder, for lack of a better term, they start to surround you. Like, they immediately seem to be aware that, like, you know what? We're going to have to go with some dirty options here, because they know the system is not designed for them, and they know that nobody gives a shit about them. So their reactions. So, like, in this one instance that I'm talking about, we did have we were specifically telling grandmother that she was being evicted, and as we told her more and more details about how she was losing her home, more and more of her family just appeared around us. And, like, I turned around, I heard a floorboard creak, and I turned around, and there's two guys that are my size standing in the doorway all of a sudden. And I'm just like, oh God, we are totally fucked on this one. Start explaining to her all of her options. Make up options. We are not evicting like, we were constantly, we're not doing it right now. We're not here to throw her out on the street in this moment. Grandma can stay here for now. And it just eventually fortunately grandma understood, and she was like gave us the gesture that gave us passage to leave, but if she got pissed, I swear to God, she would have just nodded, and the whole family probably would have just thrown us in the basement. And, it could have gotten bad. It just felt like it could have gotten bad.
Yeah. I'm just going to throw it out to people who are watching this after the fact on YouTube. If you have any stories about eviction, personal or otherwise, we'd love to hear them in the comments below. Do you feel like we've given you enough that you have an idea for a second telling?
I think so. I think I do.
I'm going to give you an option here. Normally what we do is I switch over to a lesson and give you 10-15 minutes to sort of ruminate on it.
Sure.
Does that sound good to you, or do you feel like you want to go right now while it's fresh?
I think that a little bit of time wouldn't hurt. Wouldn't hurt.
Awesome. If you want to, you can stay with us, or you can click off the screen, however seems fit to you.
Oh, I'll stay here. Okay. I'm cool.
All right. So
drinking juice.
So I am gonna throw myself a curveball a little bit on this one and set the timer so I don't run over. But this hits me, this story. And so I'm going to give us a little minute to answer that question from the panel. And I'll start off. And the question is, like, do you have any eviction stories? And what are they? When I have two. One is a Chicago one that similarly is not mine, but a acquaintance went to go look at a house that was getting foreclosed on. and he got kidnapped. They knew what he was up to, and they jumped him, and they took him to a basement, and it was a really scary moment that changed his life kind of forever. He was a different person afterwards. Didn't hurt him, but it, told him that they were going to kill him. And he definitely did not buy that house. My other one is in high school. I went to a very strange high school, and they said, does anybody want to get out of school early? And I ran down the hall to find out what this out of school early announcement was. And they said, you need to help this woman move. She lives across the street. And it was me and my best friend's little brother. And we went up and we were moving all this woman's stuff out, and none of it's in boxes. And it took us 2 or 3 trips before the little brother was like, we're evicting this woman, Dan. And I was like, no, that's ridiculous. Why would we high school students be evicting some woman? And sure enough, eventually a sheriff came by and was like, thank you so much for this help. We couldn't get her out. And we never saw her. But she clearly had a kid. And the situation, as Corey pointed out, it was like crazy. It haunts me, just putting that stuff on the curb, and that I was like, can we not do this? Can we slow roll this? What are our options? Now a guy with a gun is telling us to do it. And it was a home. It was a mess. There was stuff going on in that home, but it was a home. Yeah. Does anybody want to talk about their experience or share it with eviction or otherwise on the panel?
So the couple that I know of, there was my kids were in Boy Scouts, and there was a Boy Scout family who had, been in this community, and then really just this, small, for Lake County, Illinois sized house for years. They had a ton of equity in it, but both of them got laid off at the same time during the lovely crash, of course, right? Because everything was crashing. And, the bank didn't care that there was all the equity in the house. Like, there was no negotiating, nothing. They foreclosed on them, and, they were out. And, it was sad. It was sad.
For me, that goes so much into the story about your options of where, you just stop paying and you ride it out as long as you can. Just like Jay said, that's like, on some level, that's screwing the bank, but it's written into the contracts. That's what you're allowed to do. And you're allowed to do that sort of stuff from my moral position. You're allowed to do that sort of stuff because they're allowed to do stuff like say, we don't care that you've paid $120,000 on this $150,000 house. We can take everything. Right? That's the same level of not fair as you being like, I'm going to screw you out of 6 months of rent. And, they're for it. We are telling stories, Shoshi. Most of us, there's people in the comments on Twitch if you want to watch us on Twitch. And this is a short story that Jay told about working as someone who gave eviction notices. And we've been working on it. And so we're talking about our experiences with evictions. Shoshi is on YouTube. Susan. All right, she jumped on Discord. Yeah, we are also going to be on Discord. Okay, so Noah, do you have Any stories? It's fine if you don't.
Yeah, not really. In college, we had some friends get kicked out of their house because it was foreclosed on. And, you know, if you're in college, it's not a big deal to get, you know, it's just inconvenient. You got to find a new place. But, you know, to that point, like the bank doesn't care about you. And of course, it's completely lopsided, right? Nothing bad happens to the bank. You know, it's not a person. Whereas on the flip side, you know, this is, you know, it's been shown that the housing crisis just set back people, you know, those effects are generational, right? The damage that's done is generational. So, you know, I think you should, in my moral universe, you should never be, you know, feel like you shouldn't do everything you can to stay in your home and, you know, make sure you have one to go to after that.
Jay, can you? I'm just getting this unspoken kind of thing. So, were these a broad cross section of races?
No. I mean, I evicted a couple of white people, but overall, I would say the vast majority was African American. And especially the rental properties, which was one of the things which was interesting to us as we went along, because of the fact that, for instance, like I mentioned earlier, the bank does not want renters. They don't want renters. It doesn't matter how steady the income is. But we had people that were getting like subsidized housing. You know, part of their rent was coming like from the city of Chicago. I'm like, these people are guaranteed income. Like, why are you kicking them out? Like, their rent is being paid by the city to a certain extent, you know, at least a portion of it is. And it's like, and the response we kept getting back from people when we kind of like sideways asked these questions was always like nobody cares, basically, just to sum it up. Like, when it comes down to it, like when you read between the lines, it was just like, no, screw it. And that also was kind of a thing that had a weird effect on us because we were driving, because the both of us, I mean, like, I always kind of joke about this, like I'm like king of the white people because I am very pale. I glow in the dark. I'm like that white, and so was my colleague at the time. And we thought about that once because there was one instance where like the family was upset and they were, you know, understandably angry. And at the same time, I'm like, there was a little kid. He was a toddler. And I'm like, and I kept thinking to myself, and we talked about when we were driving around afterwards. We were like, that could be this kid's first experience with two white people. He's like, two strangers came into his house, handed his parents a slip of paper, and the next day they're out on the street. And that's it. And that was back before we thought about trying to do something about it. And we would stand there, and we were just like, we can't say anything. We were just like, here's your paper. This is what you got to do. Very cold and businesslike, trying to keep things professional, you know, because we thought that would mitigate circumstances. But yeah, I think about that kid sometimes because I'm like, you know, because I mean, I terrify my nephews. So I'm like, I may have, you know, spooked this little kid in a way that's going to affect him for the rest of his life, you know, and there's a lot of people that look like me that are not going to care. You know what I mean? Like, there could be a follow-up situation with somebody else that looks a lot like me, and they're like, let's just say less than kind, you know, with that same person. I don't know how to articulate that, you know.
I think you did a fine job of articulating it right there. There's an element that where that story has to be told of that you are being used by by folks who are benefiting from a system of inequity against other people who are also being used in a system of inequity. And this is a moment of enlightenment where you're like, wait a second, this isn't right. And I think if you blend that again, everybody has a home. Home does not mean race or gender. Home means home. All right. And then as you're going into predominantly black neighborhoods delivering this bad news, and it's dawning on you during your job that the system is failing folks. You're unhappy to do this. I mean, I just think you're telling us more now that's going to help flesh out your next incarnation of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, as you're saying that, like, and it's interesting because I think that with what's been going on a lot lately, as we were discussing this, yourself and Corey and I are talking about this, it made me remember something that happened at one point. We were in Chicago Heights, I think it was, and we were walking towards a house, and there were some guys just hanging out on a porch. You know, whatever, it's the afternoon. I hang out on my porch. You know, people do it. But they're hanging out there, and as we stop, we get on my buddy sedan, we start approaching the door. One of them hollered out, "The police are here." And you could see the entire neighborhood kind of change. Like, all of a sudden, there's somebody looking out their window and everything. Everybody's keeping an eye on what's going on. But the whole dynamic suddenly completely shifted, and we were like, they think we're the cops. And we were personally insulted because we don't like police. But we were like, does that help us or does that hurt us? Because that's going to be like, if shit gets weird, like, how is that going to affect things? Because, and it was just interesting. More than anything else, I've never been mistaken for a police officer in my entire fucking life. So that's just really interesting to me. So I've been mistaken for a priest, but no.
I'm going to cue you up to give you a chance to do a second telling.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
So I'm hanging out with a buddy of mine. We're over at a bar, and we're having some drinks, and he goes, "Hey, can you do me a favor? Can you spot me one? Can you buy me a drink? I'm a little low on cash this month." I said, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And called the bartender over, and he orders himself a double of Oban Scotch, which costs about $14 a shot. And I'm sitting there drinking well whiskey straight, and I kind of look at him sidewise, but I'm like, you know what? He said he's low on money. He says he's having a bad day. I'm going to let him go on this one. And he starts to drink it, and he goes, "Hey, by the way, you didn't say anything about my pants. What do you think?" And I go, "They're jeans. Who gives a shit?" And he says, "These are the jeans I ordered from Norway. They're about $400. I was like, "No wonder you have no fucking money." And I took the drink away from him, and I drank it myself. And I was like, I gave him a little bit of a lecture about the responsibilities, when it comes to money and budgeting yourself. And that kind of just had my mentality when it comes to certain people, if you're out of cash, if you're in a dire strait like that, you probably did it to yourself. Sometime later, I got a phone call from another friend of mine. He said that he heard I was looking for a job. I'd been out of work for close to 2 years because I'd been a mover and I destroyed my back. And I was starting to hurt for money myself. And so when he offered me a position, I was very happy to take it. He said what he needed was some help because he worked for a real estate company. And this was around 2008, 2009. And right around when the housing bubble had just popped and everything was starting to collapse. And he'd been given this new assignment, which was to give out eviction notices to people on a laundry list, lengthy list of properties that the bank was repossessing. He was uncomfortable about going out there. And because of the fact that I'm basically a giant shaved bear, he felt like I would provide some security while things were going down. And I was like, yeah, sure, it's not going to be hard. We go up to the door, we slap some paper on it. Maybe we have to talk to somebody for 5 seconds, and then we get the fuck out of there. Not a big deal. So we drive down to the deep south side of Chicago, Sauk Village, Chicago Heights, those areas. And we're laughing on the drive down there because we figured this is going to be an easy job. We drove by a gentleman's club, otherwise known as a strip club. And we were actually joking about, like, we should have lunch at the strip club, let's have a great day and we're going to enjoy ourselves. And then we got to the very first person we had to evict. We knocked on the door and it opens up, and it's a gentleman. He's got no shirt on. And you can clearly see that he's got the zipper scar down his chest, which is a clear indication that he's just had open heart surgery. And he's also carrying a colostomy bag, which is sloshing a bit. You can hear it's got some stuff in there. And we proceed to inform this man that he's been evicted. And he just looked defeated. And he asked us to come inside so he could sit on the couch because he couldn't stand. And he proceeded to tell us how a couple months back, he had a massive heart attack, but they were able to crack him open, save his life. But then after he got out of the hospital, he went to the pharmacy to get the medication that was going to prevent infection and, blood pressure and that kind of thing, keep him alive still. He interrupted a robbery in progress and got shot. And now he's shitting in a bag. And now here's two people he's never met before telling him he's about to lose his house. And we were like, sucks to be you. Here's your paperwork. And we got the fuck out of there because we didn't know what to say or what to do. We just got in the car and we kind of looked at each other and we were like, this is not going to be as easy a job as we had thought it was going to be. And my friend was like, maybe the next one will be easier. So we went through a couple of them and we just kept going through houses. And sometimes it was fun. We interrupted what can only be described as a teenage ditch party sex orgy. That was great because I wasn't dating anybody at the time, and I'll be damned if they're going to get laid. But we kicked a bunch of teenagers. We're basically like interrupting somebody's. It could have been somebody's first time. Like I'm finally going to get laid, first time ever. Here's your eviction notice. But then there were other times we go into places and you just look around at the property. These were like rental properties, and some of them had become so dilapidated because their landlords just didn't care about the people that were living in them. We went to one house where the basement was just full of black sludge, and they demonstrated for us that when they flushed the toilet upstairs, something came out of the drain down the bottom. So I don't know what the hell was wrong with that. I have basic plumbing skills, but I know that shit ain't right. We went to a house where there was a leaky pipe causing a mildew, just a mold buildup in the kitchen. I swear to God, like 15 cents worth of plastic would have fixed it. All somebody had to do was come out there. I had the stuff in my car. I wanted to fix it, but we were told that we could not correct anything that we found wrong with the properties. So I was told just to let it go. And probably the worst one was this one house. They had no glass on the front windows. They'd been told that they were going to get an upgrade, insulated, double-pane glass, and then nobody did anything. And it was November, which in Chicago, you don't want to be here in the winter. And November is when it used to start. Now it doesn't. It's global warming. But anyway, it was freezing. And the only thing keeping them warm because the heating system didn't work was just keeping the oven open. And there we were, basically telling this old lady that she was about to be evicted through no fault of her own because it was her landlord who was the one who had not paid any of his bills. And the thing is, come home from work after serving these things out and running these people through the ringer, and I'd watch on the news, and I would see on the news this distortion within the media where they kept selling this narrative that these people were doing it to themselves, when the reality was that a lot of them, they were tenants. Their property was owned by somebody else, and that person had been the one that really screwed up. One group of houses in particular, the landlord had gone ahead and used them as a means, as collateral, to get a massive loan of cash in order to get a few $100,000 in order to buy himself a mountain of cocaine. And once that was all gone, he woke up, basically, he went from being snowblind and high and waking up in court. It's like, I don't know what the fuck just happened. He was a fantastically special case because of the fact that he told his tenants to watch out. See, these were primarily African-American communities. So when he told them, watch out, there's two white guys going around scamming people out of their rent, everybody was on the lookout, and we kind of stood out. So we would knock on doors and people would be like, no, fuck you. And it got tense on occasion. People were justifiably angry. They were pissed off about what was happening to them. And they didn't really feel like they had any options. And we were told that we were not supposed to explain any of the legal options or choices to people. We would get fired if we did. But as we were doing this job, as time went on, we just started slipping in more and more details about what people could do because it felt better trying something, at least giving people a few more days before they were getting evicted, because we couldn't stop the evictions from happening. But we could at least give people like another month to save money. Because like one thing we always told them was, you're already getting evicted, so don't pay rent. Contest your eviction, and then when they're setting up, they're going through the whole process of setting up a court date. Don't pay any rent. Don't pay any of your bills. Screw it. Just save the money and then just run on the last day. Because the odds are you're not going to beat the bank in court. And it kind of gave us like this moderate sense that we were at least fighting back against things. But I remember specifically there was one time we'd just been in this house, and there was this little kid, couldn't have been older than 5 years old. And just the way he was looking at me as we were explaining to him that his grandma was going to get kicked out of the house. When we got in the car to drive off that night, I looked at my buddy and I said, hey, dude, I think that we're the man. I think like we just became like the man that everybody's talking about, the person that's like keeping everybody down. And he was like, yeah, I think that we did. I think we just crossed that invisible line. And so we went back to his place. We went through a bottle of wild turkey, and we tried to think about some other way of making money. But the next morning, all we had was a hangover. Thank you.
Boom. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that clocked in at 9 minutes. And I think that there's a lot of good in there. How do you feel?
I feel like I ended on too much of a downer note, to be honest. But I do think that
it's a process. You know, it's not supposed to be. It's not like we want people to get better. You know, the second one's not supposed to be way better. It's just supposed to be different so that you can take it and we can show that we're working.
I think though that a lot of the notes that you all have been kind enough to give me did give it a better sense of structure and more of a theme, like the struggle against the system and so forth. You know, there's only so much you can do. All we can do is try to be human to one another.
Yeah. Excellent story. Susan, are you ready to do yours?
I'm doing mine. Ready or not, I'm doing this one. And so if you thought the last story was too much about other people, wait till you hear this one, because it's got almost nothing to do about me. So, but anyway, here you go. This is
real quick. I'm gonna throw out that our buddy Alien Navigation really appreciated the imagery of the cocaine mountain.
It was good.
Yeah, good addition. Okay, go ahead, Susan.
Okay. A brave young woman named Olga Misik is a heroine. She is ready to fight for her freedom of speech in Russia, a country that does not currently let dissidents speak their mind freely, even though in the Russian Constitution, Article 29 states that everyone shall be guaranteed the freedom of ideas and speech, and the freedom of mass communication shall be guaranteed, and censorship shall be banned. In the United States of America, citizens often take our constitutional right to freedom of speech for granted. It is important to me that the United States of America should be standing up for free speech, not only for its own citizens, but also for the citizens of the world. The world still looks to the USA as an example of a country that gives their citizens the right to free speech. Vandalism is the charge against Olga, but her right to free speech is what the trial is really about. She hung banners on railings outside a Moscow district court on August 8, 2020, and then splattered water-soluble paint on a security booth outside the prosecutor general's office building. According to the prosecutors, washing off the water-soluble paint cost the government $47. Before she committed the act of vandalism, she was known as the teenage girl who read aloud the Constitution to the armed security forces at a protest she attended. The protest was because the government decided to disqualify virtually all the opposition candidates running for the seats on the Moscow City Dome. Olga stated in her closing speech, "I am often asked if I'm afraid," she told the court, "more often by people from abroad than those in Russia, because they don't know the specifics of our lives. They don't know the feeling of hopelessness that we take in with our mother's milk. That very feeling of hopelessness atrophies all signs of fear and infects us with a learned helplessness. What is the point of being afraid if your future does not depend on you?" I was never afraid. I felt despair, helplessness, hopelessness, confusion, anxiety, despair, anger, but neither politics nor activism ever infected me with the feeling of fear. It wasn't until her house arrest that she started feeling fear. And now it seems to me that all the fear that has accumulated in me over the last 9 months is concentrated here and now in my final speech, because public speaking is more frightening to me than the prospect of being sentenced, Olga Miskik said. Olga Miskik said, "Someone once said that you can't be afraid if you know that you are right. But Russia teaches us to be afraid all the time. It is a country that is trying to kill you every day. And if you are not part of the system, you are already as good as dead." She concluded her speech with a reference to Sophie Scholl, a Munich University student who, together with her brother Hans, were executed by guillotine in 1943 for their resistance to the regime of Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler. She said she was condemned for leaflets and graffiti, while I have been tried for posters and paint. Essentially, we were both persecuted for thought crimes. My trial has been very similar to Sophie's trial, and today's Russia is very similar to fascist Germany. Even facing the guillotine, Sophie did not abandon her convictions, and her example has inspired me not to seek a deal. Sophie Scholl is the embodiment of youth, sincerity, and liberty, and I really hope that I am in this way like her, Olga said. The fascist regime collapsed in the end, just as the fascist regime in Russia will fall. I don't know when this will happen, a week, a year, a decade, but I know that we will win, because love and youth always win. For her crime of speaking out, Olga received 2 years and 2 months of home confinement, which means she will not be able to leave her home from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. while under home confinement. I hope the United States remembers that we have freedom of speech and remembers that other countries are still struggling with obtaining something that we take for granted. Let's, as citizens of this country that was founded on the principles of free speech, help those who are less fortunate than us to be able to exercise their right to free speech.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Cool.
So yeah, that is a fun little essay. I suppose for some value of fun. But you know what I mean. Thank you so much. How did that feel to you?
I appreciate that you gave me notes. So I tried to throw some of them in. I did a little more research, so that helped too, I think. I looked up to see what the Russian Constitution actually said. And I also, from the time I wrote it to today, she got sentenced. So that was new that I stuck in there. So it was kind of helpful that, you told me that you gave me notes, because I hadn't seen them. And so, yeah, I thought, considering that it went pretty well.
Yeah. This is a story that was not in my newsfeed, and I did not know about it. So when I got to see it the other day, because you wanted some feedback, I got to read up on it. So thank you so much for putting this out. Russia seems like a crazy place to me. And for all the stuff that we talk about with evictions and things like that, there's a lot, it's a reminder that there are a lot of places we wouldn't want to be. And this is a general thing and not about the story, but just, all the time, right? It's that paradox. We work for change, want things to be better, but always be grateful for the good things that are in your life, whether it's government or family or friends or whatever it is. And sometimes looking across the pond will show you reasons to be grateful. So thank you for sharing this story with me. Jay, you are welcome to chime in whenever you want, but don't feel like you have to. And I'm going to go to Noah, and then anybody can jump on him. Otherwise, I'll pass it off to Corey.
Thank you for sharing this. I mean, this wasn't on my radar either. And I like the way you delivered it. Like, it felt like you were passionate about it, and that you could identify with this person. I guess that's my only criticism. I was waiting to hear what relation, what drew you to this, what parallel, what specific thing in your life made this appeal to you, or why you thought we needed to know it. That was like the only piece that I was missing out of there. And hopefully I didn't just space out and you did actually tell us. But I thought it was very powerful. And it is like a compelling story.
Thank you. Danny had the same thing. So I had even less of it before. So I need to work on that. I agree.
Yeah. Do you want to, it sort of puts you on the spot, but do you want to give, do you want to riff on it for a minute?
Why I wrote this one out of all the things I could write once a week or whatever I do these. I guess it's partly because I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could do what she's doing. As much as I'd want to do what she's doing, unlike her, I would be afraid. I wouldn't be somebody's like, oh, I'll go to jail for X amount of years or cut my head off, or, I'm more like, I just want to live through this, like I'll help behind the scenes or, do a petition, but to stand up, she stood in front of the police reading the Constitution that, they're all armed up and, and she, obviously was willing to, go one more length, since that didn't, get them actually to charge her. She hung up banners, something obviously she thought would, get her charged so that she could, even more be more like, hey,
that was the point.
This is it. Yeah. I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could actually go to jail
That's great.
for it. But I'm very impressed that she can.
Corey, do you have some things that you liked about it?
First of all, this is not on my radar at all. And I was a political science major in college, so this is somewhat new to me. The individual circumstances are new to me, but the general theme isn't. When you said that you didn't think you could do that, I would probably, I want to disagree with you. I think you simply haven't found your why, right? We all have something for which we are willing to live and something for which we are willing to die. We just need to figure out, that's part of our universal quest, is to figure out what that is. And I would say that you have that courage and those skills in you. You just have to unlock them and figure out what they are. She does, and yes, that's worthy of admiration and all. At the same time, the marked contrast between what she's going through here and the liberties that we are enjoying here, even sometimes as they are eroding or being encroached upon, there's a very big contrast, or it seems like there's a visible contrast. I liked the fact that you had done your research, and I also liked the fact that this was something that was not heretofore on my radar at all. So thanks for bringing that to my attention.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you have a place that you want to do this?
Besides here? No.
Yeah, besides here, no.
No.
Because it's
No.
written like the sort of thing that you would send to a senator or something like that.
Yeah, it does sound, like a lot of my, affordable housing or give the aid to my kid. That is, that's the one, I would go to jail and die for is my children. And obviously, since it's trying to get a bill passed for one of my children so his aide can go to college with him, which hopefully I should check on that, see if it got passed or not yet. But
yeah, I guess I would encourage working on this, and it never hurts to send off letters to people.
yeah,
and,
I should check
I
to see what we can do.
And it's the sort of thing that you can throw up and send us in the crew copies of it, and we can send letters off too.
I need to do some research to what would help her the most. Like I'm not sure.
Yeah, I really liked what you said. I would disagree a little bit too, and I like that idea of you just haven't found your why. You could do it. This is the thing for her because she's in a specific situation. She can do it because she's called to do it. You don't need, we're not under that kind of oppression. And so it makes sense that you wouldn't be able to. But I love that as an opening or an arc. I couldn't do this. And so it spurs me to action. I think that's really cool that's how that happened. I find that very compelling. That it made you think, what am I willing to do? What can I do? And you wrote about it and you thought about it. What? Let me think.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How did you come across this? Like, are you, is this just a sort of human interest story that whatever, you heard somewhere, or are you into, the greater struggle in Russia? Is Russia, a place that you pay attention to?
This was in my Google feed.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's in my Google feed because, obviously I've looked up something, that, because like now I'm going to Dakar, Senegal in July 2nd. And so now that's in my Google feed, like all the time, what to do in Dakar, like it's, Google's amazing. So I must have done something that Google thought hey, you want to know this. You need to know this. Yeah, and Russia, not not particularly. I do have one Russian Facebook friend that actually Danny got me, and I don't know if he remembers the story, but we had Russian summer people who stayed at one of our Airbnbs, and they
You
got.
went to the Pitchfork Festival?
I don't. What were they doing?
Okay.
But anyway, we had to buy them pizza because it got so confusing about them not getting into the apartment, and so one of them is now my Facebook friend, and every once in a while messages me, and she's actually graduated. She's a doctor now. So I don't know. Yeah, that she hasn't like talked to me in a while, so I don't know. Yeah, so
Yeah, there's a documentary on Netflix called Icarus about a guy who expatriates and gets basically he comes to America and he gets put under the Witness Protection Agency because the Russian government is going to go after him. And his story is incredible. And just the way that they think and operate, it's another level. And you can see that in some of her writing that you quote. It's really cool. How can I be afraid? This oppression is my life. Most people walk around, they just think, you can get nabbed and thrown in prison and you can't say what you want. Yeah, there's another one a long time ago that I was watching a news thing, and it was an American news channel, and they were just going around asking kids, what do you think about Putin? And they were all like, he's awesome. And then the newscaster was like, it's amazing. We took an informal poll and everybody said he's great. And it was just like, you could tell by looking at these people, like, you look like a narc. What do you mean? Like, nobody's going to tell you the truth. You're like, you're going to throw this on national news, as some nothing. Like, these people, you're putting these people's lives at risk. And just no sense of it. But for me as a viewer, I was just like, there's complete terror in the backs of some of these people's eyes as they're like, we love him. What? He's the best. Yeah. So let's think about some things for the second telling real fast. And Noah, you're up for the end story.
Yeah, I was wondering if Susan could try to do an intro about, we talked how did this get to me? Why is this important? I don't know.
Yeah.
That would be interesting to me because that's what we talked about a lot. And
yeah.
Yeah, because it's almost 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
And he's got to do a retelling.
Yes. So you can do just do a little bit of riff of times you have stood up for stuff.
Oh. Okay. All
yeah.
Right.
Okay.
All right. So the times I've stood up for things has pretty much always revolved around my children. And so the latest one that I did was for my son, who would be very helped if his aide goes to college with him. And currently, colleges get to decide whether that can happen or not. It's not just an automatic, sure, we'll let the aide come. So I went to the Illinois State Senator, and I also went to a lot of other people too. But he actually took it on and said, you know what, this is a no-brainer. Of course the aid should go, and I'll get my people to write it up. And so he did, and it got passed in the Senate committee, hands down. And then it went to the Representatives Committee, where I testified for it, and it also passed with everybody voting for it. So it's now out of committee, and it will be in the floor of both the Senate and the House in the state of Illinois. And I've been assured that it will pass. So that, is one. I guess there is one other one that I've done that didn't it sort of revolved around my children, mostly because they'll need affordable housing. But we have a big lack of affordable housing for all of the service and retail providers that we have in Lake County. And so I'm on Lake County United in St. Mary of Vernon to try to procure land. Actually, the land they said they would donate. It's a hospital in Waukegan. Said they would donate the land. And now we're trying to get some of the funding that the federal government's given to the state of Illinois, basically, to try to get some of the senators and representatives in Illinois to say that they'll earmark some of the federal funds to building affordable housing on this plot of land in Waukegan. So those are the ones I've been standing up for lately.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Susan. And now we are going to go into our final story of the night. Afterwards, I've thrown up the link a couple times, and I'll throw it one more time up. We're gonna be on Discord, and you can ask us questions and hang out with us there. Susie was there for a hot second, and maybe she'll be there with us after the show. But right now, what we're gonna do is tell a final story, and we do it for two reasons. And Noah's gonna tell us a story, and he's gonna tell either Jay or Susan's story from the first person's perspective, as though he had lived it. And this does two different things. It rattles the subconscious of the person who told it, and it also ends up being really validating. And then the second thing that it does for the audience, you guys who are listening, is it gives you this concrete example of how important voice is and how voice works. It's a very abstract kind of thing. You always hear, you got to find your voice, but what does that mean? When you see two people tell the same story, same plot, you get to see it really concretely, exactly what that means. And I'm going to pass it over to Noah. Take it away.
All right. Thank you. Just a warning, my camera may freeze, and I'll try to fix it if it does, but do not panic. I did not get, a spell was not cast on me.
Can you volume up just a bit?
I do not know. If I put my microphone closer to my mouth, does that help?
Yes.
Okay. So here I go. I'm a big dude, and I've basically been a big dude ever since I was a little guy. I once broke up a bar fight by getting up to go smoke a cigarette. That's the kind of big dude I am. And I have had some big dude jobs. I worked as a mover. And unfortunately, no matter how big a dude you are, no matter how Compton you are, sometimes something happens that fucks up your life. And in my case, that was a back injury. So I was out of work for a number of years. Part of that was that my back injury sort of lined up with the housing crisis, and jobs were hard to come by. And so when a buddy called me telling me he had some work for me, I was excited to do it. And my buddy, he worked for a company, and what they were asking him to do was basically go out and hand out eviction notices. I wasn't excited to do that, but I basically didn't have a choice. I needed money, and I'm a big dude, and big dudes help out their friends who are not quite as big as they are. And honestly, even though, I felt, like it wasn't the most honorable job, I thought it would be easy. Someone's going to do the job anyway, and I might as well be that person. I'm not going to change anything by, not having rent money or not having food to eat. So the very first one, we go up. My buddy is dressed like a nerd, and he has told me to dress like a scary brute, and if I can at all do it, not to shave, so I look even more disreputable. So we have sort of a good cop, bad cop thing going on. But the person who opens the door has no shirt on. He's sort of a middle-aged guy, and he's got the zipper scar going down his chest. And that's the kind of scar you only get from medical professionals cracking open your rib cage to do some extensive road work in there. And the second thing we notice is that this guy is holding a colostomy bag. And so we give him the paperwork, and we explain to him, your landlord is going to lose their house, which means that you are in all likelihood going to get kicked out of your house. And he sort of, he's just exhausted. He's not emotional about it, but he just asks us to come in so he can sit down, so he can process this. And he starts explaining to us that he just had, a massive heart attack. That's why he had the surgery. And then as he's recovering from the massive heart attack, he had to go to the pharmacy to get the drugs to make sure he doesn't get an infection and blood clots and all that. And he intercepts a robbery, and he is shot in the course of that robbery. And that is why he is carrying a bag of shit with him. So that's the first one. And we basically immediately realized this job is going to be a lot harder than we expected. This is not slap a notice on a door and run for the car. This is going to be some, human interaction. And so what ends up happening with this job is that a lot of these evictions are landlords losing their houses, and we're talking to the tenants. And a lot of these rental properties are on the south side of Chicago. So we are two white dudes evicting majority Black people. And we are definitely cogs in the machine. There is some inequity going on, and we are making our living being a part of that. And there's some human suffering that's going to come from this, and we are part of that. And it's pretty hard to take. We go to houses that have no heat. The oven door is kept open to keep heat in the house. We go to a house that has a leak that's turned the kitchen into, a black mold factory, and the leak could have been fixed with a $15 piece of plastic from Home Depot. We are evicting a grandmother in front of her entire family. We are evicting people that are living in a house with sewer bubbling up in the basement anytime, the toilet is flushed. And basically we figure out that we need to do something, right? We can't we can't live with ourselves. And what we end up doing is, we're not lawyers or anything, but we know more about the process than what any of these people do. And we basically explain to them that they're fucked. They're going to get kicked out. But they can play the system, and we can tell them how to use the system against itself. And so what they can do is, they cannot pay rent. They're screwed anyway, so they might as well keep that money and make sure that they can put that toward a better situation in the future. And the other thing they can do is they can contest the eviction, which in Chicago will buy them 90 days. And if they wait till the 29th day of their 30 days and they contest it, that gives them another 90 days after that. So that's what we end up doing. And I don't want to paint this like, I'm Robin Hood and I'm the hero. And I don't want to say that every person was a victim here. Some of these landlords very clearly made bad decisions. One guy hawked all his houses so he could buy a mountain of coke, which apparently he hoped would kill him, but he came out the other end and all his tenants lost their house. And I had a friend who, lived in a $2 million house and asked me to buy him beers while wearing $400 imported Norwegian jeans. But what struck me then is this narrative that everyone who lost their house had brought it upon themselves. And I remember sitting at home and watching TV and seeing talking head after talking head explain that this was just irresponsible borrowers. And that's not my experience. And even though all I could do at the time was try to help them find a way to make the best of the situation, what I can do now is to remind everybody that, the system is the problem. It wasn't the people who suffered from the crisis. So that's what I got.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And I hope there's time to hang out with us afterwards in Discord. I am going to make sure that everybody is unmuted and we can all say goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.